Hey guys, JG Physio Coach here, and today we're talking funky shoulder blades. That's coming up next. We're back! Oh! So today we're talking funky shoulder blades, as I said before, and that name that we want to bear in mind is the scapula. So scapula is just the sort of anatomical term for the shoulder blade. And what I mean by funky is that there's a lot of funny things that can go on with the shoulder blade. We can end up in really, poor positions, poor postures, malalignments, that kind of stuff that can have a really significant impact on reducing our mobility or predisposing us to injury. So the thing about the shoulder blade is that there's the scapula is very little bony articulation of the shoulder girdle to our actual body. It connects in here through the clavicle, your collarbone, to sit onto your rib cage. But bar that, the rest of the attachments are really through muscles, and because muscles can obviously change length, they can shorten, they can lengthen, it means that the shoulder blade is very much predisposed or very vulnerable to being put into a poor position as a result of muscle imbalance. There's a lot of positions that you can end up in because there's a lot of movements that occur at the shoulder blade. So let's go through those real quickly now. So the first ones, we've got up and we've got down. We've got elevation and we've got depression. So elevation, coming up like this, you could think of this as shrug, and then depression. Not that your shoulder blade is feeling blue, it's just that if this was elevation, this would be depression, as in a shoulder blade coming downwards. The next two, there's a couple of different names for this, but we could think of the first one as, what you'd probably associate with a row, or squeezing your shoulder blades back together. That's retraction or adduction. So that would be shoulder blade coming in like this. Now, protraction or abduction is where it's coming, it's basically the opposite. So if this was retraction, then this would be protraction or abduction. The next one we've got is where the scap is going to rotate on this axis like this. So we've got internal and external rotation. And the easiest way I think about it is internal, where it's flapping, it's lifting off, and external rotation where it's flattening down. So if this was internal rotation like this, you can imagine this is your back's here, your shoulder blade's flat down. Internal rotation starts to lift off, so that inside border starts to lift off. Then external rotation is the opposite. So external rotation, come around like this. So imagine that shoulder blade, the inside border of your shoulder blade flattening back down against your chest wall. So another rotation coming up next, and this is now upward and downward rotation. So upward rotation, don't get confused with this because it's a different axis. So internal, external rotation like this, upward and downward rotation like this. And I think the easiest way to think about what's up and what's down is that where is the socket pointing. So you can see here's the socket, here's that glenoid where the head of your humerus sits into. Upward rotation, which is what would be pointing that socket upward. So you can imagine this is upward rotation, and downward rotation would be pointing the socket downward. Anterior and posterior tilt. So tilting forward and tilting backward. Anterior tilt would be this, so where that top of the acromion, that bony shell of your shoulder, which is part of the scap, starts to encroach and almost like the roof of your house is coming further over the top of your humerus in this case. And posterior tilt or tilting back is where that roof starts to lift back off. So then we have certain muscles that will then perform these movements, these joint actions that we're talking about of the scap or the shoulder blade. Now, and I'm going to try and categorize these, and again, I could talk about this all day, but to try and sort of condense and summarize for this video, we're going to talk baddies first. So the guys that typically get short, tight, and overactive and put us into compromise or a kind of winging scapular position. And winging is when you start to get this lift off the shoulder blades, almost taking off the rib cage, which isn't what we want. That's one of those things where that's a risk factor for impingement, and generally when these muscles get tight and you have winging, you're going to have poor scapular upward rotation and protraction, which is what you need to allow full mobility to get overhead into a stable position. So the bad guys, we've got number 1, pec minor, and pec minor specifically rather than pec major because it attaches to this coracoid process at the front of your shoulder, and you can think of it as it shortens and tightens, coracoid process being part of the shoulder blade rather than the shoulder joint itself. As it tightens, it tips you into that anterior tilt. Number 2 in the bad list are your rhomboids. Rhomboids are right at the back of your shoulder blades, and what they're going to do, and particularly what we're talking about, is what they do as a group when these guys get together. What do they end up doing to the shoulder blade? On their own, rhomboids are a retractor, but they can also, where they're positioned, downwardly rotate the shoulder blade. Last but not least in the bad crew is a muscle called your levator scapula. And this is a muscle, again, that's in that crew of the downward rotators. So, again, it does other things in isolation, but for the purposes today, what we're really talking about is that its function with the pec minor, with the rhomboids, and alongside the left scap as a trio that starts to then downwardly rotate your shoulder, which is the opposite really of what we want when we're trying to get into a good position, have full mobility going overhead. So most importantly then, what are the muscles that we need to activate to try and improve scapular upward rotation and prevent winging? And the 3 we're going to talk about are upper traps, lower traps, and your serratus anterior. And these muscles work as a good trio to help facilitate upward rotation of the shoulder blade, prevent winging, keep the shoulder blade sitting snug on your chest wall as it rotates upwards in a nice, solid, stable position to allow full mobility and prevent that impingement that can happen when we pinch and all of the tendons or the bursae, all those structures between the roof of your shoulder, which is the acromion, and your head of humerus here. So posterior tilt exposes it off, so we've got room, and anterior tilt shuts that space off, so we're more likely to impinge. Oftentimes people will assume that they should be doing kind of rowing exercises or scapular sort of shoulder blade squeezes to correct winging. But remember, if we're saying that part of that wing, part of that lift off, if it's in the case where it's just your inside border that's lifting off, is internal rotation, you can't correct an internal rotation position with retraction or adduction. Does that make sense? So if I'm lifted off like this, doing this as in pulling my shoulder blades back together, is not going to correct that. It's not going to change the rotated position that the shoulder blade's in. And one of the main muscles that's weak and inhibited that can do what we want to have happen, flattening that shoulder blade down, is your serratus anterior. And I always think of them as kind of like tree roots that then squeeze and flatten that shoulder blade back down to the chest wall. And that's actually activated through a combination of protraction and upward rotation. So that's it. We've talked funky scap, funky shoulder blade positions, what are the bad positions that it can end up in and which are the muscles that do that, and what are the good positions that we want and which are the muscles that do that. So exercises will be in the next video. Didn't want to overload you with too much just in one go, but next time we'll go through exercises, the do's and don'ts and the rights and wrongs to try and correct funky shoulder blade positions to regain mobility and prevent injury. So we'll see you next time.